to another episode of Wits and Weights. And we are streaming live in the Wits and Weights Facebook group, and we just renamed it recently to that so it's easier to find. You can join the group absolutely free, get access to tons of free information, guides, training, and interviews like this one, which is an early preview to what will become a podcast episode, and tons more related to strength and nutrition. You can find the link in the show notes. I'm your host, Philip Pape. I'm the founder of Wits and Weights Nutrition Coaching. And real quick, one of the best ways to support the show is to submit a 5-star rating and review for the podcast with Apple or Spotify, or just share the episode. You could take a screenshot, throw it on social media, tag me at Wits and Weights. Okay, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while because one of my superstar clients, Tyla Serro, is joining me today to share her journey. She was actually my first interview guest way back in episode 17, before we started working together on her nutrition plan. And she even planted the idea of me becoming a nutrition coach. So I'm very grateful for that. I've always admired her, I'll say, tireless positive energy. She has a passion for everything she does, whether it's fitness or any other causes she's involved in, and her commitment to the process, despite challenges thrown her way. So let me tell you guys a little bit about Tyla Serro. Tyla is a powerlifter. She's a mom of a toddler. She's a military spouse, and she's a working professional. She keeps herself busy lifting heavy weights. She volunteers with protectors of animals, and she does all this while working full-time as a configuration manager in the aerospace industry. Tyla recently acquired the title of Connecticut State Referee for the United States Powerlifting Association, the USPA. And she's going to be judging an upcoming powerlifting meet next month. So we're recording this in October and the meet is in November. And maybe we'll put a link up to that when it's out. She's passionate about raising awareness of primary lymphedema, a rare disease that her son was born with. And when she's not doing all of these things, she enjoys the outdoors with her family. And she truly believes that an active lifestyle is one of the many hacks to living your best life. So Tyla, I'm stoked to have you on the show to share your story, the ups and downs, all the success you've had this year. I think you're a true inspiration, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Philip.
So last time you were on the show, we talked about your powerlifting journey.
We did.
We did. And we talked. So listen to that episode 17, guys. And today I want to dive into nutrition with you. So let's just start earlier this year. What I remember is you'd been listening to the podcast. It was maybe 10 episodes in at that point. You reached out to me to give me some feedback, and then we started going back and forth from there. And that eventually led to your interview on the show, becoming a coaching client, and so on. So walk us through what was going through your mind when you first reached out to me, and then we'll go from there.
So do you mean when I think you reached out to me first, right? And you asked, I think the first said was, hey, do you want to be on the podcast and talk about powerlifting? And so I was really excited. I thought that would be really fun. So I quickly binged all of the episodes of Wits and Weights. So that way I would, one, I had agreed to being on the show before I had listened to any episodes. And in hindsight, you probably should feel out the whatever it is that you're agreeing to do, right? Because I had no idea what message or messages you were putting out there. So I quickly listened to, I think, all of the episodes in a couple of days, and I was really impressed with everything that you had to say. You definitely took an approach that I agreed with. Everything made a lot of sense. Sorry, hang on one second. My cat is trying to eat my dinner. So yeah, you
part of the fun of it.
Yeah, you were saying a lot of good stuff, and I was like, wow, this guy's really smart. And I had no idea. I had followed you on Instagram, and I knew you were lifting weights and doing things like that, but I didn't know that you knew so much about strength and conditioning, health in general. And I almost felt a little embarrassed myself for kind of like, I've said this more recently to Philip, that I consider myself a lazy athlete, and that I don't know a lot of the reasons why I do the things that I do. Like, I've always worked with a coach for my programming. And I wasn't really sure why I did those specific movements. I just did them and I saw great results. So listening to Philip's podcast inspired me to listen to more content like that. I mostly listen to like true crime podcasts, which is a completely different genre. So that kind of gave me a bug to listen to more content like that and become more interested in like what is progressive overload and how does all of that work and why is nutrition such a big important part of all of that. So yeah,
Cool.
you invited me on the podcast, liked it, thought it was great. I think after our interview, I probably was like, "Hey, Philip, you should be a coach. You're really good at talking and smart. Why wouldn't you do this?"
Yeah, it's funny. So, I mean, I love everything you talked about with education and awareness, even though you've been at this for years. And thank you for correcting my memory of all this because I get things out of order. You're right. I had invited you onto the show, and then you listened to it, and then got back to me about it.
Yes.
So, thank you for correcting me there live, which is great. And when we started working together, so yeah, you're right. After the last interview, we were off camera or off recording,
Mhm.
and we had a little chat about nutrition and coaching, and that
Mhm.
kind of planted the seed. But as you said, you already had the solid foundation of practice, at least of strength. Obviously, as a competitive power lifter, you'd work with nutrition coaches. So maybe tell us a little bit more about your fitness and nutrition goals, maybe just over the last year as you were working through that
Okay.
process. Yep.
So I was working with some other coaches right up until I made the switch to work with you. Once you decided to um, take on the commitment of becoming a certified nutrition coach. And I have nothing but great things to say about my previous coach. She did a really good job. I guess the onus was on me that I wasn't really good at adhering to the protocols that I was given. I know when I first started working with them, I was in the beginning. I was very compliant, adherent to the macros, and um, I was able to meet the milestones or goals that I was setting. And then as time kind of went on, I just became less and less interested in tracking, really. So we tried to switch the approach to intuitive eating, which was so funny. Right when I made that switch to intuitive eating, I was intuitive eating at the time, and I listened to one of your episodes where you talked about that, and you were like, for people who are brand new to
Mhm.
the tracking and um, nutrition and whatnot, it's really not a good idea because it's really hard, especially if you don't have any foundation of weighing food and knowing what an appropriate portion is based on the goals that you have. It can be really hard to just, like, what is a serving of protein? That really depends, right, on how many grams of protein you need in that one meal. So I did have a pretty good foundation. I was pretty comfortable, I guess, with what a balanced plate or meal looked like. So I did do intuitive eating for a couple of months, kind of as my exit with the previous coaches that I was working with. And at that point, I had gained a decent amount of weight. I want to say around like 10 pounds in like a year's time. And that was kind of weird for me because normally my weight would fluctuate maybe like 3 to 5 pounds, but 10 seemed like kind of drastic. And I didn't really, wasn't really comfortable with that number. I was like, my clothes are starting to feel really tight and uncomfortable. Like, what's going on? I got to dial my nutrition in a
Mhm.
bit. So when I started working with you, I definitely knew that that was the goal. Now, however, like I said, I've been strength training and working with coaches on nutrition and whatnot, but I've never done a true caloric deficit and actually stuck with it ever. Um, so I'm super proud that I was able to do that with you.
Yeah. 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 That's so awesome. And I want to, so you said you had tracked before, you then went to intuitive eating. Of course, we track, and you put it really well. You put it better than I can about, somebody who isn't quite experienced using tracking to develop that skill before they go to intuitive eating. But if we go even before that, had you tried other like dieting in the past, kind of what a lot of people try, whether it's paleo, whole 30, keto, vegetarian, anything like that? Had you tried those in the past?
I mean, I think all of us who have been doing this for 5 plus 10 years, you try it all, right? Like
That's
I
right.
can remember in high school even, thinking that like sugar was the enemy. So anything I would like read label. That's when I started to learn to read labels too, probably in like a home economics class. And man, you'd start reading labels and just certain things were bad. So anything that had added sugar, I would try to avoid that. But I would find that like you restrict yourself so much and then you end up binging it. Um, so I remember I did something like that where I basically cut out all added sugars, but at the end of the day, like a carb is a carb, right? Um, so that of course didn't work. And then in my first few years of college, I started doing CrossFit. And at the time, paleo was super, super big with all of the
Mhm.
CrossFit people. And I was like, oh yeah, I can get behind that. Like I love meat and potatoes and yeah, no carbs. So I don't think that I ever did any of these diets truly, but I tried, right? I would call
Fully
it more like
dogmatically, yeah.
a low carb diet, didn't really know what I was doing, didn't have a legitimate training plan, was just going in the gym, finding random workout stuff of bodybuilding.com and slinging weight at my college gym. But it worked, I guess. So I'd say I probably gave paleo the most effort, but it was also probably drinking way too much alcohol on the weekends and stuff like that. And I don't think that's part of the paleo plan. I never tried keto. I did try the carnivore diet for maybe like
Mhm.
two weeks. Oh my goodness, like no.
That's gotta be tough, right? Because 'Cause you're cutting out all plants,
I think
basically.
I can't even remember. It was like
Yeah,
orange juice, eggs, a lot of red meat,
yeah.
uh, just really interesting stuff. I mean, hey, if it works for you, keep doing it. But
Yeah, so and that's the question
no.
is do these things even work for people? And when we say work, what do we mean? Do we mean work to lose 30 pounds, or do we mean work for something you can live with for the rest of your life, right?
And I think you put it really basic. Like you've said this before. Maybe you haven't said it specifically, but other people have. Like it doesn't really. I mean, it does. It does matter what you're eating, but you need to be in a caloric deficit in order to lose weight. It's as simple as that. And how you choose to fuel yourself.
Yeah.
Mm, there's better options, maybe, but other than that, I think those were the few diets. I never tried like Whole 30. I never did any like cleanses
Mhm,
or all those like I would call typical. Like a lot of women will do like Whole 30 or like I feel like keto is pretty popular with women too. But like I'll
mhm,
talk. I remember listening to an episode I think of Joe Rogan on the keto the real aspect of it, and like to get yourself into a true state of ketosis is pretty difficult to do, and I don't think
mhm.
the average dieter can get themselves there without the help of an experienced probably coach. So none of those
Yeah.
things worked for me, none of those things were sustainable.
Yep. So
Shocking,
they
right?
so they didn't work. Yeah, no, they didn't work, and for a lot of people, you hear time and again they tend to not work. That's why we have, I think something like 95% of people eventually regain all their weight within 5 years. It's something like that. So we're trying to change that, and I want you to talk about what you've learned, even since we've started working together, about the process that others can use when it comes to your relationship with food. And where I'm going with this is you mentioned energy balance is important, right? For gaining
Mhm,
and losing weight, calories in, calories out. But we also know that it's not as easy. It's simple, but not as easy for people to actually do that in practice due to a bunch of other reasons that have nothing to do with food, right?
mhm,
Like weekends, or social
mhm.
events. And maybe we can dive a little bit into that, the process we kind of go through to identify those triggers, those obstacles and things that have nothing to do with food, and deal with those.
Yeah, weekends. So I always tell people that there's a huge like for me personally, food, there's an emotional connection that I have with food. I love food. I love sharing a meal with friends, family, even a stranger. I can sit down and drink some coffee and eat, a croissant or whatever, any delicious thing, and I feel like there's some level of joy that brings me, and then also that like conversation as well, and they just seem to go really well
Mhm.
together. And I always tell people I have like really good discipline, but I have terrible self-control. So I'm disciplined in the sense that like I typically don't like people come over my house and they're like, you guys have no snacks. And I'm like, well, yeah, like what's the point of snacks? Like just put together a meal. Um, and the snacks I do have, I guess my friends don't approve of.
Oh yeah,
But
and they're thinking like bagged packaged foods, right? Like chips and stuff. Yeah,
Cheez-Its and
sure.
pretzels and things like that. And
Yeah.
like,
They
I
don't
mean,
want
I've got
cut
a
up
fleet.
cucumbers with hummus. They want
No, or they don't like my
Doritos.
peanut butter because the oil separates.
Yeah.
But yeah. So if so, back to the discipline self-control thing, right? Like I typically don't buy that stuff. I just buy stuff that I know I can eat in appropriately, so that way I'm not like binging it.
Right, so you
Whereas
control your environment in that
right,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But if I go out to like a social gathering and there's a huge charcuterie board with a ton of cheese and jellies and jams and crackers, my self control is like really hard because it's there and it's in front of me, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna eat it.
Mhm.
And I tend to be like the type of person, and you've actually taught me like if you go over your macros by like 100, 200 calories, it's not a big deal. But don't just like say screw it and like I hope I can say that.
Yeah.
Um, whatever, like I'm just gonna, binge all these and just go 1,000 over your macros,
Mhm.
which I personally kind of had that all or nothing mindset, and I'm still working on like not being that person. Um, because it can be really detrimental to your goals and progress, right? Like
Yeah.
a couple hundred calories is maybe not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but when you're doing that on a weekly basis, every weekend, you're going over by a ton. It's just going to take you longer if you're in a deficit and you're trying to lose weight.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and let me just stop there because you just hit on the I think that's the heart of the vast majority of people, where the issue is. You just talked about a lack of self-control, and so it basically comes down to emotion and in the moment decision making. You're all of a sudden presented with all these options. You're like, "What do I do?" And then you make a decision, and you're like, "Ugh, I feel a little guilty, and I'm a little
right,
bit over my calories, but what the hell? Let me just keep going." And especially if you throw alcohol into the mix where you don't even realize how much you're eating, or you throw appetizers at the Mexican restaurant or
right,
whatever,
yeah,
it adds up. And like you said, on a weekly basis, it can sabotage your goals. But conversely, if you're over by 100 or 200 on a given day on a weekly basis, it really isn't that big of a deal. Don't beat
hmm
yourself up over it.
for sure.
Aim for perfection, but don't beat yourself up when you don't get there. That's a good.
Yeah, and you and
Yeah.
you really helped me see that too with like I tend to be because of my personality and I feel like I tend to be somewhat of a perfectionist, and if things aren't perfect, I'm like, well, it's ruined. Just forget it.
Mhm. It's
And you would help
binary. Yeah.
me in during my like weekly check-ins see like the positive sides of things and be like, yeah, I know you like I was focusing a lot in the beginning on my scale weight and not the trend weight. Like every day I was like getting excited to weigh in. Um and it would fluctuate a little bit, but I'd be like, woohoo, when it would fluctuate down some. And then it took me a couple, like maybe a month or two to really be like, okay, I really need to be looking at the trend weight here. Because I would mention that in my check-in and be like, oh, my scale weight fluctuated a little bit. And you're like, yeah, but when you like look out at the big picture, your trend weight is still going down. And that's what we're trying to do here. So I was like, oh, okay. Like adjusting my mindset in a way that I didn't even know I was capable of doing, really. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's another great point you made about a trend weight. Now that's the term we use because the app we use, Macro Factor, uses that term. But just for
mhm,
the listener or the person watching, all we're talking about is a moving average, right? If you did
right.
this on your own in a spreadsheet, it would be taking a moving average, or even if you weighed yourself once or twice a week and just looked at it over time. But what Tyler's saying is that if you look at your on any given day, you look at the scale, you could freak out because it could go up by 3 pounds or it could go down by 3 pounds. And over time, the trend is really what matters, right? So,
Mhm.
so speaking of the weight and the data and the tracking and the macros, you mentioned tracking macros, and you went to intuitive, and then I got you back to that.
Yep.
Um, when did you start tracking those, and why?
With you or it, like ever?
Yeah, just more of a general question for for the listener, but I mean, like, do you think people should track macros? Why should they do it? You alluded to earlier, right? As there's the education and awareness piece, but I mean, is there more to it than that?
So that's a really interesting question.
Mhm,
Short answer is no. I don't think everybody should track macros. I think
mhm,
we're probably a very small minority in the world, right? Like the average person probably does not track macros. Um, and I think it goes so there's so much to this with wellness and health and nutrition and also mindset. And I think that a lot of people who maybe get into this space or they want to lose weight, there could be a huge emotional connection to that. And it may not come from like the healthiest of places. Like if their goal is primarily like, I just want to lose weight, I want to look better, like I hate the way I feel or look. Um, Tracking macros, if you've never done it before, could be a really hard thing to do. And the whole point, I'm not a coach, but I would assume as like a coach, you want to help people, you want to like create sustainable habits that will work for a lifetime. And is tracking macros something that you can do for a lifetime? I mean, maybe you can, but I don't think that's really anybody's long-term goal. And the average person too, I don't know if it will work super well for them, but I think you yourself have to really figure out like, okay, well, what am I trying to do here? And I think you've taught me to see that like all of this is just data. It's just data.
mhm,
And if you separate the emotion from it and you just seriously look at it as like data, because that's one thing to say too about the app that we use, Macro Factor. With previous coaches and apps that I would use for tracking, I would not be truthful. I would often
mhm,
underestimate or not track things. And then when I would, my coach would see, okay, this is what your weight's doing. This is what you're telling me. This is what you logged. I don't know, you know what I mean? It's like I was doing myself a disservice by
yep,
not being 100% honest. And what I really like about macro factor is like it is, and you see it live time, that it is not in your best interest to not track what you eat.
mhm,
Because if you do that, it's going to think that your expenditure is less than what it actually is.
mhm,
So you should track everything. And if you're not going to track, then just don't track for that day. Um, but I mean, I get it. Depending on like your lifestyle and your goals, it may not be for everyone. I will say that if you're serious about wanting to lose weight or gain weight or understand the data and how all of this stuff does work, it's definitely going to probably be the easiest way to reach those goals.
yeah.
It works,
Yep.
plain
Yeah,
and simple.
I like how you put that. It's the easiest way. It's, something that seems complicated or seems inconvenient or seems like it'll take much time. Once you figure it out, it's a skill, right? Within
Hmm.
days, you can start to figure out how to do it pretty quickly, where it just takes a few minutes out of your day. But what
Yes.
Tyler just said, what you just said was, if I interpret it, is the structure itself creates the freedom kind of to get to your goals, because now we have information, we have understanding, and you talked about expenditure. And just so we can clarify what we're talking about, that's the metabolism, that's the calories you burn every day. If you know what you're eating and you know what you weigh, then you know how much you're burning every day. So your coach, if you're working with a coach or yourself, then okay, this is why I'm gaining or losing weight. There's always a factual reason behind it. And that
Hmm.
doesn't mean there's not other things at play, like stress, sleep, hormones, especially for
Hmm.
women, especially in perimenopause. There are a lot of factors, but you've got to rule out all these variables one by one. So I
Right.
like what you said about macros. My clients, I'll use those. But if someone came to me and said, I really don't have a good relationship with macros, I don't want to do it, is there another way? Of course, there's always an alternative. It's going to be slightly less optimal and slightly less effective from a time perspective, but from an
Right.
emotional perspective, it might be what the person needs, like using portions or just tracking protein or something like that. So
One thing
these
too,
are all great points, Tyler. Yep.
one thing that I think is interesting. What was I going to say? Can't remember.
I rambled on.
Uh, Maybe it'll come back.
Okay, yeah, this is a stream of consciousness type deal. We go off on tangents. It's all good. All right,
Yeah.
so let's switch from macros. Think about so far. What would you say is your most proud moment on this journey so far?
One actually, like it's crazy. So it's October now. We started this in July, and there were definitely some hard days and weeks and feeling like, and that's the whole thing too, is if you're in a caloric deficit, you're eventually going to feel it. You're going to have nights where you're like, I'm hungry right now, I need to just go to bed, and
Mhm,
tomorrow's a new day, and maybe I'll make better or different choices. I don't want to say better or worse because it's whatever, but make different choices when it comes to the volume of food that I'm consuming, so I feel a little bit more full tomorrow. um so it wasn't easy. Definitely wasn't easy to do it. It took a ton of like discipline and self control, and saying no to certain circumstances. Not that I did that all the time. I did. I will. I'm not going to sit here and say like I didn't have any fun this summer. I went out. I enjoyed myself. I
mhm,
did limit the alcohol though. I would say in total, I maybe had five total drinks during this whole deficit. For me, alcohol is just not a big priority. It's not worth the additional calories. I'd rather have ice cream.
mhm.
So pick your vice, but you can't have it all, or you shouldn't, or it's just going to take forever. So
But you could have some of it, so that's
yeah,
part
yeah,
of the point here. Yes.
absolutely. You can have like you can't not, and I think that's the whole point of too. It's like you can eat just about anything in a deficit. You just might be eating less. So, um,
Somebody
for
said
me,
they're eating ice cream
I
while they
know, I'm like,
watch, by the way.
"Yes."
Yeah.
For me, I got addicted to, like, Yasso bars, which they're just frozen Greek yogurt. I think they range in calories from, like, 100 to maybe 150 for the, like, chocolate covered ones. Uh, they're super, super macro friendly. So those are a good ice cream alternative if you are in a deficit. We just started
And
buying
when we say
2.
macro friendly, we mean high protein?
No, they're not
No,
high
they're not.
protein.
Okay.
They're like 100 calories. So they're
Yeah,
probably like 15 to 18 grams of carbs and low fat and probably not much protein. I'm not somebody who ever has an issue with hitting my protein.
that's true.
I'm always over. Um,
Which is
I know
fine. You can
that
never be
can be
too
tough.
far over. The protein's fine. Yeah.
Protein can be hard for somebody who's not ever tracked it, right? Because like,
Mhm.
when you think of the average, what does the average person eat for breakfast? Maybe a bagel, maybe some cereal,
Oh,
some fruit, oatmeal. None
yep.
of those things are high in protein. So people, Americans love carbs. I mean, I'm an American, so I can say that. I don't know what other cultures like. They probably like carbs too. Who doesn't?
You're
But
gonna be getting a lot more carbs now though, because you're gonna be
I
on a
I
building
don't know
phase
how to
here.
handle it. I know I need to do the reverse
Ty
of
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
because Tyla's talking about so we just finished she said she finished a deficit. She just finished about a 15-pound fat loss phase, I think,
Yep.
roughly. And it was over a reasonable time span, about 3 months, about the time we
Right.
want to do, 12 weeks.
Mhm.
And she was able to enjoy most things that she enjoys, but some trade-offs and some restraint involved. And now we're gonna turn it around and try to build some muscle, which is gonna be a different. I'm gonna be telling her to eat more food.
Yeah, it's only been, we'll say like a week, but last week was kind of crazy for me nutrition
Yeah,
wise. This week, I didn't do it today, but tomorrow I need to actually like divide. What I like to do is like, so take my macros and then divide it by like the number of meals that I plan on having, which is usually 4 or 5. And then try to make a balanced meal within those targets. And I always like to give myself a range. So if I'm like, all right, I need to have about 25 to 35 grams of protein per meal,
hmm
35 to 50 grams of carbs per meal, and then fat, same type of thing. Usually probably 10 to 15 for my macros, adjust as whatever your macros are. But yeah, I'd say my proudest moments are actually completing a deficit, losing weight, doing my check-ins on a weekly basis. That was something I was pretty bad at with my previous coach. They could not get me to do my check-in. And I will say, if you're not a client of Philip's and you're considering working with a coach, Philip has a pretty awesome setup. Also use macro factor, also get a digital scale. Like these were all things that you gave as advice in your podcast, and I actually took it and I was like, wow, this made a huge difference to be able to just step on the scale in the morning and poof, it beams to my phone. Did have a little bit of issues in the beginning with that. I think I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my Bluetooth or something. But it makes it so much easier. And again, going back to one of the first things I said when I joined this call was I'm a lazy athlete. A lot of us like to be lazy. I think you even maybe said that. That's why you
Mhm.
like to make a lot of processes streamlined or
Systems and
more
process.
efficient.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Because like you want to take the easy or lazy way out. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you make something easier, you're probably more likely to be compliant with it, right? If something is hard, you're not going to want to do it. So thanks to all of the advice Philip gave, I hacked my way to make things more streamlined, more easy. So that way, when I do my check in now, instead of it taking me 45 minutes to complete, it takes me 15. Um, and yeah, one of the apps that you use for clients is super great because it's like a dashboard and it's got all your data right there. So if you have like a smartwatch, you can connect that and you can see your step data, your sleep data, your weight, um, your measurements, progress photos. That's really cool to have that all there. The previous coaches that I was working with, I had it in like a Google Docs thing, and the thing was like over 100 pages long. It was just a mess. It was really hard to like actually compare data points. Working with you has made that really easy to do, and it's great.
Cool. So I didn't tell Tyler to say any of this stuff about me, my coaching, so I appreciate it.
Big
Um,
plug.
and no, no, that's great. But I'm like, make sure to get that in there. But she did. But I do. You really hit on a point when you talk about the proudest moment being not just getting the result, which I know everybody wants the result, but the skills that allowed you to adhere, be compliant, and have consistency toward the result, which is something you can carry forward, I mean, for the rest of your life. And that's one thing we all struggle with is doing it and doing it regularly and then continuing to do it. And a
Mhm.
coach can help because, they poke you and they give you that extrinsic motivation. But of course,
Right.
you have to do it yourself as well at the same time. And your comment about systems and process and efficiency and tools. Yeah. I mean, we come from engineering backgrounds, we're techies and stuff like that. So we understand sometimes the value of that as long as it makes sense, as long as it pushes things forward.
Mhm.
So the other piece besides the doing it part is and the accountability is the education, right? I'm a huge fan of education awareness. Anybody listening or watching knows this, um, of helping you understand why we do things as opposed to saying just do it because I said so. So you can call it evidence based, science based, just stuff that works, whatever. What's something you've learned that was like a big aha moment or um, something that changed your perspective or mindset about nutrition concepts?
Um,
Just one thing. You've already mentioned a few, so
I've learned a lot. I feel like there was something. Can I just do like a kind of silly? This isn't really science evidence based, but it was something really interesting that you taught me when I first started working with you.
mhm,
Is um, like it's if you think it's gonna take too much time to like weigh out all your food, like weigh your plate and then just like weigh the total weight, and then I think it was like subtract out the weight of the plate or something like that, and then you can kind of like break it apart. Let's say you had, this much protein, this much vegetable,
mhm.
this much carb. You can divide that by what it looked like. And that's a pretty good estimate. It's like, what do you say? Is it 20%, 30% of what you want to be? 20%, right?
Yeah, yeah, 30 actually, if you're within
30?
30% of
Okay.
your estimate. Yep. Mhm,
So that's something that I learned too, that the whole 30% thing, like you just have to be close, really, and, like, that'll pretty much work or get you to where you wanna be. It doesn't need to be perfect, which is something that maybe my personality type being, like, type A, perfectionist, it's
mm,
gotta be perfect, every little detail. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect, you just need to be consistent, and you need to be really consistent.
mhm,
So, like, something, I think you maybe mentioned this in one of your podcast episodes too in the beginning, you said, like, I don't if you're just, like, doing a splash of creamer in your coffee, like, whatever. Don't track it, but you need to be consistent with that. If you're not gonna track it, don't
Mhm.
ever track it. Don't just start tracking it, like, on Tuesdays, you track your creamer.
Sure.
I don't really track my almond milk because I do unsweetened almond milk,
It's
and
like
it's
15 calories
like
for a whole
water.
giant cup. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's something I never really have tracked, I mean, and I still was able to do a deficit, lose weight. It was
Yeah.
fine. So,
Yeah, I like that. All these little hacks and skills, they add up. I mean, the the 30% you're talking about, just so people know, is it's better to track within 30% than not track at all when it comes to trying to understand your intake. And that's what
mhm,
Tyler's saying is if you go to a restaurant and you have a bunch of food, you don't know what's in it, you kind of eyeball it or you take a picture and later on you just estimate, how many grams and split it up by the ingredients. And I think Tyler, you were talking about specifically if you're like at home and you have the plate, you can
yeah,
weigh everything on the plate somebody serves you, and then you can weigh the empty plate, subtract the difference, and then divide it. And we're making it sound maybe a little complicated, but it's these are helpful skills when you get into tracking with food scales.
yeah,
So good
yeah.
stuff.
So that was one thing that I learned. I mean, Philip literally does, like, tips of the day every day. I don't know, he's got, like, a ton of content because I would try to do that for a few days and run out real quickly. But, it's usually, like, really helpful tidbits of information that sometimes it might seem like, "Oh, yeah, that's obvious," and then other times it's like, "Oh, wow, I had no idea that that's how that worked," and it's just a quick little knowledge drop, um, that I find really useful, so please keep doing it. I look
Cool.
forward to them. Even if I don't get to read it right away, I usually will catch up on it, um,
Yeah,
and
and
it's
one of the tricks is that
valuable.
a lot of the information comes from, clients and people watch podcasts and people ask questions, and it's like everybody has something they're trying to figure out. And so,
Mhm.
even if 99 people have heard it, the 100th person hasn't. So if it's going to resonate with somebody and help somebody out, that's what we try to do.
Right.
Awesome. Now, we touched a little bit on the weekends and the dining out.
Mhm.
Maybe we can go a little bit more into the strategy, one or two of the strategies we use for planning ahead. Weekends for you had been and maybe continue to be a challenge because the routine is off, right? And you're going out. You talked about a little bit earlier today about if you had the charcuterie and what do you do? But what is the strategy we use ahead of time to plan for that? That other people struggle with this. So what do you think
Right.
might work in that situation?
Yeah, so, I really liked your approach to my struggles with the weekends because you didn't just, one, like, rain on my parade and be like, "You need to stop doing that." You were always like, "Okay, you know what? Like, these are a few options that we could try." So you came at it with several ideas, which was great. People love choices. Um, even my toddler, who's 2, loves to make a choice. I give him an option, like, "These
Hmm.
are the 2 shirts you can wear today," and he likes to pick one. So that was great. I was able to choose from several options that you gave, and one of them, the one that I chose, was we can do higher calorie days on Saturday and Sunday. Now, this may not be the most optimal thing for your training because ideally you wanna have higher food days on the days that you're working out. Um, but we know that, like, you're consistently not meeting your macros on the weekends. So what we'll do is we'll shift your caloric intake. So Monday through Friday, your calories will be slightly dipped, and then Saturday and Sunday they'll be slightly higher. Nothing drastic, but enough wiggle room so that way, if anything, it was almost just like a mental thing for me too.
Hmm.
So on the
Hmm.
weekends, I feel like, I don't know, I was treating myself, or
Yeah, sure.
having a little bit more, less structure than I do during the week,
Yeah,
which I
you
feel
you
like
kind of
most
banked
people can
those
relate
calories.
to
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, especially, if you've got, like, a family and the weekend's gonna be busy and you don't wanna, like, show up to all of your events with packed Tupperware meals. I mean, maybe you're that person and you're dedicated and good for you, but it's hard for me to be that person. I
Hmm.
like to enjoy myself. Not that you can't enjoy yourself with a Tupperware meal, you absolutely can, but
You
you can do
absolutely
both.
can. Yeah.
You can.
That's a great strategy. If you're listening, very, very simple. strategy, right, is to just toggle your calories during the week. And it may not be the weekend for you. It may be Friday, it may be Wednesday. It
Mhm.
depends on your schedule. And then we kind of joked about it earlier today, that now that Tyla's eating more and we're going to be eating even more food shortly for a building phase, I said, why don't we just stop doing that for now? Because you're going to have so many more calories to work with. You may
Mhm.
want those calories during the week while you're training to support your muscle growth. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm excited to see how that goes. Like you said,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
it's real nice to go from being in a caloric deficit to now eating at, well, what we're trying to find as my maintenance. Um, my
Yeah.
husband's actually doing a cut right now.
You're going to overtake him on the
Oh, I
calories
was like,
eventually.
I keep joking with him, like, you could have done this a couple of months ago and we could have done this together and it would have been a
Uh,
lot easier. Cause like
yeah.
at night he would be eating his snacks and I'd be sitting there like so sad and I want to have
Hmm.
that. And now it's kind of the opposite way around. Like my maintenance calories are just below what his like deficit calories are. And he's like, this
There
makes
you
no sense. I'm a big guy.
go.
So
It's two different goals. It's two different goals.
yeah, yeah. And I
you know.
told him too, I was like, just stick with it or you're going to be doing it longer.
Yeah,
Rip the Band-Aid
and if you're doing it the right way, you're gonna be in a cut for a quarter of the time that you're not, or a 1 to 3 ratio of cutting to building or maintaining. That's the
Mhm.
goal, right? Is so that
Yep.
like 9 months out of the year you don't have to be dieting, and then the 3 months where you are, it doesn't have to be that bad. It might be a
Yeah.
little tougher the first time you do it, but then after that it should get better.
I will say too that the deficit gave me, like, a confidence boost in that now that I know I can do it, I actually am excited to, like, almost take charge, be in control of, like,
Yes.
my fitness, my health,
Yes.
whereas before I was kinda just, going through the motions of lifting and eating and like, "Oh, I've gained, like, 10 pounds, time to dial that in." But now it's really exciting to be like, "Hey, you just successfully did a caloric deficit, you can do anything." Not that I think I'll ever do, like, a bodybuilding show or something like that. That takes some serious
Mhm.
commitment, dedication, time, money, um, a lot of things, but it gave me the confidence to say, "You know what? If I actually really did set that as a goal, I could do it. Of course I could do it." Um, and
My
that's
next
good.
question was going to be whether you have confidence in sustaining your results, and you just answered that question, and I love that because you said before it was like, "Oh, I need to lose some weight now." Like we've all been there
Yeah,
our whole lives. It's like look at every now and then you hop on the scale, like, well, how did I gain those 10 pounds?
yeah, where did that come from?
And you're in control, and yeah, we might have done it in a kind of process oriented way, but you know what it took to get there, you know what it felt like, you know what you ate on most days. Like if you
Mhm,
had to repeat that without macro tracking, do you think you could do it?
mhm. Oh,
uh, yeah, I'm asking you that. Like, do you think you could do it without the macro tracking now that you've been through it before once?
I don't, the audio cut out there for a second, but do I
Oh, that's
think I
weird.
could
Oh, that's weird.
do
Yeah, do you think you could repeat a deficit now anytime with or without the macro tracking, knowing what it feels like and what it takes to do it?
without it? I don't know, Philip. I honestly don't, I hate to say I don't think so or that I couldn't,
Mhm.
because I don't want people to think like, "Oh, if macro tracking is not for you, like, you're never gonna lose weight."
Yep.
Uh, I just think it's gonna be a lot difficult, and this actually I remembered halfway through this point of what I was gonna say a little while ago. Um, what you eat and what you fuel yourself with is in your control, right? You have control over that, whereas a lot of these other factors that, um, play into, like, maybe why you're having a difficult time losing weight or can't lose weight, like sleep and stress and hormones and all those other variables are a lot harder to control than what you actually eat. So if you can just say, you know what, like I'm going to make a conscious effort to eat these things. I know these are going to fuel me appropriately for whatever my goals are. You can like start there. Whereas like stress, for instance, like maybe you have a really tough job, maybe you're commuting a lot, maybe you have like a lot of things that you just have a harder time controlling. Not that those are things that you can't take charge of as well. I think you can do it all. But baby steps, and you have to maybe the nutrition part of it is the easiest one to actually take control of. Um, I,
Yeah.
I like the model like anything is possible, but again, the tracking macros is just it's an easy way to take control of the data.
Yeah, it's a very effective tool, and I think, if you apply planning ahead, which is what the macro tracking does, right? Like you've been through a deficit, you know about what you eat in a given day and how it's distributed. You
Mhm.
could conceivably create your own meal plan for that, and in the future repeat that without necessarily tracking. And I just want people to be aware of that. That is a possibility. It might be a fun thing to challenge yourself with in the
Mm.
future to get off of, because what I want people to know is you can get off of macros eventually if you want to.
Yep.
Um, I personally have tracked macros for a year and a half now, and I just like to do it. It's a habit, but not everybody is like that.
Right.
So the other things you talked about are the other areas that affect our nutrition that aren't food, right? Sleep and stress and things, and you can't change everything. Sometimes you have to cope. But what you just hit on is everybody's different. Everybody has their own like red flags and their own priorities, and it may not be food for somebody, but it's often food for most people.
Right.
Um, so now, what about, let's talk about lifting for a little bit. You're a strong woman who competes. You like to lift. It's not anything I had to worry about educating you about in any way when we met. So, how important is strength training to you and your ability to get results?
Oh, it's super important. I mean, that for me, it changed my life. Like I think back in 2012, 2013, I was never like a super athletic person growing up. I played some sports, but I was the type of kid who like on the cross country team, my I wasn't fast and my friend and I would like run into the woods and we'd sit on a rock for like 20 minutes and be like, "Okay, it's time to run back." Um I was definitely not like setting any records or anything like that. I think I tried out for like the softball team, didn't make it. I did cheerleading. Ugh, no, I'm just kidding. Um, but I never was like super athletic. And then I did CrossFit for a little while, hurt myself. Still went to Planet Fitness and did things like that. And I would go on bodybuilding.com and I would find like workout programs.
Mhm.
And I was like kind of a good squatter, just naturally. People are like, "You're built to squat," whatever that means. Um, so I would just go to the gym and squat every day, 6 days a week, and, I got better and better at it, even though I look back at, like, old training videos when I first started, I'm like, "Oh, this is horrendous." But, it was really fun, and it built a community for me of people that were like me, and then a friend of mine, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, she invited me to her powerlifting meet, and this was in Rhode Island, and I mean, you had women who were like 138, 48 pounds, squatting like close to 400, benching close to 200, and pulling close to 400 at like a local meet, which to me, I was like, this is crazy. These women are
Mhm.
so strong, they're totaling almost 1,000 pounds. What? Can I do that? So I joined a local gym close to me and I mean, made lifelong friends, and I started listening to another podcast too, not just Phillips, about like strength and conditioning, and like they really like say strength is for everyone, and it really is. And that was like one thing that I liked too is like you didn't have to have like a certain body type or
Mhm.
look a certain way to strength train. Um, it can be really intimidating when you first start going to a gym, like I just think of a lot of those, like, commercial type of gyms, like, it's like, "Alright, are people there to, like what are they really there for?" But in the actual lifting community that I joined, it was really truly people that were just like, "Hey, we like being strong," and people that really got behind you when they would see you, like, lift big weight for you, too, and it's all the other thing too that I like about lifting is it's competitive, but like it only really needs to be competitive with yourself. Like you can be
Mhm.
competitive with
Yep.
yourself. You can keep getting stronger.
Great
You can
point.
keep making progress. And it's not like a win or lose sport in that sense. I mean, it can be as you get like more elite, but it's just it's a really fun thing. I I
Yeah.
I, I love it.
It's fun. It's part of what you do. I think it's also, of course, been instrumental in your ability to get your nutrition results as well, because you make it easier to hold on to your muscle and prioritize fat loss, which I think is important for people to understand, even if they're not doing it at a powerlifting level of lifting, just
Right.
getting that resistance training in on a regular basis. So we're about to start a muscle building phase. First of all, are you worried about getting big and bulky? And
No.
second, how do you feel about that
No,
with the
yeah.
upcoming
So
phase?
that's like my biggest pet peeve of I'll like hear women people one thing my previous coach taught me was like don't give advice just like it like advice is never free or it shouldn't be because I've in the past like tried people have come to me and asked like oh I'm not losing weight or can you help me like you're so good at this stuff and I'm like I'm really not that good I'm not certified in any of this like I can tell you what worked for me in my experience but you should really probably work with a coach um and, I feel like every woman says, like, "I just wanna get toned. I don't wanna have big muscles." I'm like and me, I'm like the opposite. I'm like, "I want big muscles." Um,
And
like
it's hard, right? It's hard to get them.
yeah, like, I wanna be, like, stronger than your boyfriend or husband. Somebody had a shirt like that at the gym. It was like, "I lift more than your boyfriend does," or something like that. I'm like, "Yeah." But, I don't know, maybe that's just my personality, like, I have nothing like, I've never been, like, a super petite female. My weight normally is, like my adult life has been around, like, 140 to 150 pounds. 150 pounds usually is pushing the, like, "Alright, I'm not feeling comfortable in my clothes." Um, and I can, like, remember talking to a coworker, telling her, like, how much I weighed. I was like, "Yeah, I weigh about 145 pounds." And she's like, "You weigh that much?" Which, like, don't say that to people. That's not
No
like, I mean,
comment.
I think the intent is good, right? But it's like,
Right,
you
she's saying you don't
she's
look
saying
like you weigh that much.
she's saying, "Oh, you
Like,
look
"Oh,
much
that sounds
smaller than
heavy,
that.
but you
That
look smart."
sounds
Right.
heavy." Because I
Yeah,
think, like, maybe the ideal size for a woman is
right.
less than that, which whatever that ideal is, you can be somebody who weighs 145 pounds and be, like, a rock, solid, lean muscle, and you can be somebody who weighs 145 pounds and be, like, not.
Yep,
You could
yep.
take 2 people that have the same body weight, maybe same height, but, like, have completely different body compositions. So in that regard, like, weight doesn't matter. I mean, it matters for you individually because your body knows, like, what is probably a good healthy weight for you to be. And, like, I'm not gonna, like I'll just put it blunt, like,
Mhm.
being overweight, being obese, not necessarily your BMI, but, like, if you are truly an unhealthy weight, like, that's not good for your body. Our bodies are not designed to carry around all that extra weight. Our organs are not designed to sustain that.
Yep.
Um, if you wanna live a long, healthy life, you should probably see if there's something you can do about that, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything controversial in what you're saying. We talk about this on the podcast all the time. No, I mean there's fat shaming and stuff like that and body and the whole body image thing that's like a different topic. But when we're talking about just blood pressure and weight and stress on your
Right.
joints and all those things,
Yeah.
there's a factual component to it. And you're saying, there's a wide range where you can be in a healthy weight
Right.
and it's different for everybody. And if honestly, if I was working I would want every female client that started with me to actually want to gain weight first, but that almost never happens because
Yeah.
everybody wants to get to what they think is their ideal weight. And even you wanted to lose weight. Let's be honest,
Right.
right? But
Right.
and that's okay too. I mean, I myself like I want to be leaner, but then I also have to spend time building muscle. So the
Mhm.
building muscle side of it is super important because until you do that, you're never really improving your body composition. You're just kind of oscillating between a weight
Yeah.
range. Those are good points, Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're getting close on time here. Let's say somebody is listening, they feel overwhelmed about everything we're talking about. They don't know where to start. Like, what advice would you give them?
You have to start somewhere and you have to be serious with yourself. Like, if I think a lot of people struggle with actually setting goals and sticking to them, uh, don't wait. Today is as good as any day. Don't wait until, oh, I'm going to wait till the new year. Just start. And even if that's just like, you know what, like I can't afford to pay for coaching right now, or um, like there's so much information out there that's free, whether it's a podcast or YouTube or a lot of these people who are coaches that have clients produce a ton of free content on their social media pages, their websites, that you, if you are truly interested in learning about this stuff, that you can consume yourself, and you can probably teach yourself how to do these things. Like I said in the beginning, it's really not difficult. It's not like super hard to do. Tracking macros is not a super hard thing to do. It actually makes the whole process easier. You just kind of have to bite the bullet and like try it, and give it an honest effort, and then make the determination after giving it an honest effort, like, is this for you or is this not for you? Is it working or is it not working? And then go from there. But I do think that if you have the means to pay for a coach, finding a good coach, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I've been working with a coach now for, well, Philip, since July or end of June. But before that, I was working with a coach for the past like year and a half. So you might ask, like, well, why are you going to keep paying for a coach, or don't you know all of this stuff? And the answer is yes, I do know a lot of this stuff, but the accountability for me personally is huge. So maybe that's what you need to do too. You put money on the line and you're more willing to stick with something and hold yourself accountable.
Yeah, I couldn't have said any of that better myself, so I will leave it at that. Tyla's wise words. We've got great information on this podcast and many others. That's how I learned. I did a lot on my own before I decided to go out and be a coach, and I've also had many coaches myself, and I still have coaches for training. I mean, we all need them many times in our lives, and sometimes it helps us accelerate getting to where we want to get, and helps us become more educated so that we can be more successful for the long term. So last thing, Tyla, where can people connect with you, or any causes that you want them to support?
Sure. I'm mostly active on Instagram. My handle on there is at Tyla Serro.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. I didn't lose you, did I? At Tyla Serro, Instagram. All right. So I'm gonna include that info in the show notes. And I hope anyone watching or listening who feels like, what they've done before hasn't worked, that they feel inspired, they feel empowered by your story today, because I think it shows, you can do whatever you want. You can take control, like you said, of the process and your results. And if you're committed to learning, right? If you're committed to learning what works, learning about yourself and focusing on it. Um, so you can do it on your own. You could accelerate it with a coach. You can see that someone like Tyla with tons of knowledge and experience, she's competed at a high level. She still faces challenges that we all face, emotional eating, accountability, maybe some direction, guidance, those kinds of things. So if you found the discussion helpful, or if you have questions for me or Tyla, just comment on the video, click the link in the show notes, or go to witsandweights.com, look for the Ask Philip section on the homepage, including questions for Tyla. You can throw them in there and I'll make sure they get back to her, and we'll get back to you with an answer. So thanks again for supporting the show and listening to Tyla's story.